often hear people ask the question, why is it that children of narcissistic parents or parents who are on that cluster B spectrum somehow, why do we often end up having narcissistic partners in life? In this video, I want to address this question and give you some tips of what you can do if you recognize that one or both of your parents were narcissistic or abusive in some way. So when you're raised by an abusive person, your brain and your nervous system get programmed to recognize abuse as love and home. In other words, accepting abuse becomes normalized at a neurological level. This isn't even your conscious brain. This is the primal and emotional parts of your brain that are working against you. The sad thing is you will repeat that pattern of accepting abuse, thinking that it's love and home in your life until you identify it, until you do the deep inner work that it requires to reprogram your entire operating system. I would say probably around 97% of people that find themselves in an adult abusive relationship came from a family where one or both of the parents or major caretakers was either a narcissist, a psychopath, a sociopath, a borderline, an alcoholic, an addict, or otherwise missing, absent, and or abusive in their life. Now, for the smaller percentage of people that just ended up getting in one of these relationships as an adult, that usually happens because of some kind of loss, some kind of major vulnerability as a result of a loss, maybe the death of someone very dear to you, maybe a really tragic divorce or a sense of loss in your career, or just something really vulnerable that happened to you. And in that moment, you happen to come across a psychopath or someone who took advantage of your vulnerability. So that's not what this video is about. We're gonna deal with the people, those of us who were raised in a family where one or more of our caretakers was narcissistic or alcoholic or addict or something of that nature. Because really at the end of the day, it's the same kind of patterns. You'll get that intermittent love, sometimes there's the love bombing, sometimes there's the devaluation, sometimes the parent is present, sometimes they're absent, whether physically or emotionally. Like they might have physically been there, but they were gone. They were checked out. They couldn't be there and emotionally engage with you as a child, or they were going through so much with whatever was going on with them that your feelings didn't matter, your needs didn't matter. All of that can create the same kind of programming that then sets your nervous system and brain up to continue to recognize that kind of stuff as an adult, as love and home, because it's familiar to you. That was your early life programming. It's very difficult to face that truth. It's normal not to want to see someone in your family, especially a parent of yours, is abusive. That's very difficult to accept. Why? Because those are the people that were most meant to love and support you in your life, and they ended up being just the opposite. A parent who isn't on the side of their child, a parent who always takes the other side, whether it's another kid, another teacher, some bully, anybody else, that parent never being on your side causes a deep trauma of betrayal to you. And despite all of that, and understanding that at a conscious level, it's still very hard to accept that that parent doesn't love or support you. Because your neurology was programmed since you were a child to recognize abuse as love and home, that became the template of your relationships in life. That became the background for everything that you recognize as familiar. And somebody put it on Instagram, it's been going around the internet, I don't know who the original author of it was. They put a post up that said something like, be careful when you meet new people who feel like home, if home wasn't a safe place for you. And that is 100% accurate for these kinds of situations. Another reason why it's really difficult to accept or even identify this kind of abuse in your family is because, especially in the family, that abuse is going to be minimized, justified. You're going to be gaslit to accept that that's normal, or that was somehow okay, or because it's your mother or father or whomever, that's acceptable for you. So then what happens as an adult, you meet another person who's abusing you, treating you like crap. They do the same minimization, justification, flip it around on you kind of tactics, which is called Darvo. By the way, if you haven't seen that video, I'll put the link up here for you. You're used to that. You're so used to that that you automatically defer to the reality of someone else because you're still doing that with your family. Another reason it's difficult is because of the spiritual and religious programming that you might have got during childhood. So things like honor thy mother and father. So if you were taught these kinds of things, if you're still involved in those religions or spiritual groups, it could be that they're still putting these ideas in your head that you just need to, have compassion for your parents, that, something in their life made them who they are, and you should just have compassion for what they went through. And I recently did a video to address that dangerous perspective about, poor thing, they just had a difficult childhood. Why that's so dangerous, because it could keep you stuck in the cognitive dissonance. It is a half-truth. Usually they had a bad childhood, because why else did they get programmed to be like that? But if you're listening to this video, you're realizing you also had a bad childhood, but you didn't turn out that way. You didn't turn out to be abusive. You don't treat other people like crap and then justify that based on the abuse of your past. So those are very different things. Another reason is familial abuse is normalized in TV series and reality TV shows and movies. You see it in the media. This is normalized as this is what it is, and you laugh about it or you deal with it, or you have your own addictions and problems, and then everybody laughs at you and makes fun of you because you have addictions and issues going on in your life. But no one's looking at the real problem. No one's talking about the problem. No one's addressing the problem. No one's calling out the abusers. No one is setting healthy boundaries with those abusers, right? So that's why a lot of that kind of programming from the media could be really dangerous, because it further encourages you to normalize that kind of behavior from your own family. If you put up with that from your family, you're teaching your nervous system to tolerate that same behavior from other people. It will keep happening. You will keep tolerating that behavior from other people until you take a hard stance against the abusers in your family. It will just keep repeating. Once you take that hard stance to abusers in your family, it's going to be a lot easier to recognize other people who are abusive, and it's going to be a lot easier to set those boundaries and protect yourself with no contact as soon as you reveal an abuser. You're not going to have that subconscious desire to keep working it out, to keep trying, to keep feeling compassionate for this person who's hurting you, because you're not tolerating that from your own family. Another huge reason why it's difficult to notice abusers in your family is dependency. This, I think, is the number one reason why people stay in contact with abusive people in their family. Somehow they're dependent upon them. That's often financial dependence. So one of the very first things that you need to work on if you want to break free from your narcissistic abusive family is to get yourself financial freedom, financial independence. And you're going to have to do all that without letting them know. Don't let them know what you're working on. Don't let them know what you're doing. Don't let them know about the money you're making, about the money you have in the bank, because they will just try to sabotage that, because they understand that is a tool for you to leave. That's a tool for you to escape the whole dysfunctional mess of that family. And their whole game is to keep you in it, because it all falls apart when one person steps out of there. So really work on your financial dependence. If you're stuck in it still and you're like, there's no way I can leave, I'm financially dependent, that's what you got to focus on first, is getting your financial dependence, your financial independence. That way you can get out of there and you can move on. And then you can work through all the other emotional stuff. You can work through the stepping up of the boundaries and the no contact down the road. But first step is have that independence. Another form of dependency is emotional dependency. So maybe you've been trained to believe that your mother is your best friend, but your mother is actually abusive and she sabotages you and she doesn't want to see your happiness and success. So, you keep going to her for emotional support and she keeps abusing you. She keeps knocking you down. You keep knocking yourself down and lowering your self-worth every time that happens. You got to start building self-reliance and not going to people to support you who continually abuse you and let you down. Maybe you can eventually find another support network, and hopefully you will, but you've got to start with that self-reliance, because it all starts within yourself. And finally, another reason why this is so difficult to identify in your family is because when you're in the early stage of healing, this is not something that you can face. Usually it's another situation in your life. It's a romantic partner, it's a friend, it's a boss, it's a coworker, it's someone else in your life usually that leads to the wake-up call, where you realize you're in some kind of abusive situation and you've got to get out. In that moment, it's entirely too much to deal with that situation to start to face childhood. So what you first need to do is get to safety, get out of there. That's when you can really start to dig into that. You process first this immediate situation that's taking place. Then you're able to look deeper into the inner child issues, into your childhood issues, and start to unpack and deal with that stuff. But you don't just unpack it all at the beginning. It's not going to happen. There's actually built-in things in your brain and nervous system that might give you glimpses. I had glimpses too, like glimpses that someone in the family or multiple people in your family is not safe, that they're abusive, but it's entirely too much to deal with for survival in that moment. So you only deal with that immediate situation first. But if you don't eventually take that self-responsibility to start working on your healing process, understanding the abuse was not your fault and you are the only one responsible for your healing process now. That's what gets you over that first threshold and into stage 2. And in stage 2 is when you really do all that deeper work. That's when eventually you can start to unpack all this stuff and deal with that childhood stuff. That's when you want to work on reparenting. Reparenting your inner child, something that was probably never done or not done correctly when you were a child. That's where all that programming took place. Look up John Bradshaw, his book, Homecoming. You'll also find lots of YouTube videos that he does on the topic that's really helpful for working on your inner child. You also need to own the responsibility of radical self-care. Working on healing your inner child is part of that. Being there for your inner child, meeting your needs, honoring your needs, listening to your feelings, setting boundaries, and working on the 4 pillars of recovery after narcissistic abuse. If you didn't hear the recent podcast episode that I did where I offered you a free PDF report on those 4 pillars, check out the link below the video in the description. It's a free PDF, it's 8 pages, it's 2 pages on each of those 4 pillars. Those pillars are the support for your recovery process. There's a lot more to do, but those 4 pillars are the most important part, because even through the ups and downs and everything that's going on, those support beams are going to hold you up. They're going to keep you going so you don't hit rock bottom again. Sometimes it's not immediately obvious when you're dealing with the current situation in your life. You might think, oh, well, my parent really isn't like that. Maybe they have their issues and they're a little bit different. But once you get further along in the recovery process, that's usually when you realize, actually, it's the same exact thing. It just looked different on the surface. There's different forms. There's the overt, there's the covert form of abuse. Then there's all the different nuances in between the different kinds of abusers. And also, abuse looks a little bit different when it comes in a best friend or a social acquaintance, a boss, a coworker, a romantic partner, and the family. It's the same pattern. Narcissistic abuse is the same pattern across the board, but it varies slightly depending on the kind of relationship that you have with that person. So the love bombing is still love bombing. It just looks different when it's coming from your mom or dad than when it's coming from your romantic partner or your best friend. The easy button is to minimize it, to bury it, to stuff it, to justify it, to keep going on like it's okay, and to keep accepting it, maybe with a few more boundaries. But really, that's just going to keep you in the legacy of abuse. That's going to keep you passing on that legacy of abuse to the next generation if you have children, even if you're the codependent. If you're the one who's tolerating and putting up with it, that's the enabler, that's the codependent. And you're going to teach those same patterns to your children. So your children will then end up usually attracting someone like your parent or the abusive people in your family, because you're modeling those behaviors for them. So it's not helpful for the next generations for you to stay in that. And a lot of times I think people justify, like, They want their kids to have a family, to have grandparents and all that. But if the grandparents are abusive and the grandparents are just passing that legacy of abuse on to your kids and you're tolerating it, you're enabling that to happen, then it keeps going. No matter all the inner work that you're doing to heal, if you don't set those boundaries for yourself and for the future generations, the legacy of abuse is just going to keep going on. So if you want to transform your life, that means you have to do the work. You have to be willing to do that work. It's hard, it's painful, it's difficult, and it is worth it. It's not the easy button. The easy button is just to keep going down that legacy of abuse. The more challenging road is to take the reins of self-responsibility and work on your healing process. It wasn't fair, it wasn't your fault, but it happened. So now the only way to transform your life is to do the work, to take responsibility for yourself, to do that work. Healing is optional. Not everybody decides to do that. A lot of people are going to take that to their grave, continually being a victim their entire life because they never leave that victim stage, because they never take self-responsibility to get over that first threshold. So I really encourage you to grab the reins of self-responsibility as soon as you can so that you can start to transform your life, so that you can live the life that you deserve to live, so that you can walk away from those abuse patterns of the past and stop yourself from continually re-exposing yourself to more traumatic situations like that. So again, check out John Bradshaw's work, Homecoming, and his videos. Get that free PDF that I'm offering you on the 4 pillars of recovery. That link is below. If you're really ready to dive into this deeper, check out my self-care mastery course. This course is designed for people who are programmed since childhood and families like that, who want to transform their entire lives. It will help you move through that second stage of healing where you're doing radical self-care. And finally, if you're looking for someone to help you through that process, you're looking for a licensed psychotherapist, I recommend that people check out BetterHelp. It's the largest online portal of licensed psychotherapists where you can get matched with somebody who can help you in the recovery after abuse and trauma. There's a special box that you can tick so that you can get matched up with someone who specializes in that. If you start to work with a therapist and you don't feel that connection, you don't feel they really get it, you want to get matched with someone else, they'll let you get matched with a new therapist at no additional charge. And if you use the link that I'm going to offer you down below, it's betterhelp.com/innerintegration. When you click that link and you go through that intake questionnaire, that will give you 10% off your first month of therapy. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, give it a like or leave a comment below. If you want to offer some words of encouragement to other people who are just starting to realize, just starting to dig into these patterns in their own family, I would love it if you leave that comment below. I'm sending you a big hug.